Okay, well, thank you all for joining me today. As you all know, I am Keith McCall. I'm the Assistant Director of the Office of Graduate Fellowships and Awards, and I'm one of the Fulbright Program Advisors here at FSU. So you're with me today for us to talk a little bit about the process of applying for a Fulbright as a graduate student at FSU. Tell us a little bit about what brought you to thinking that Fulbright was the right thing for you to do in graduate school. And then we'll talk through the internal application process that FSU has. So if we could start with the four of you who are here with me today, introducing yourselves, your field of study, and briefly telling us where you're hoping to go on Fulbright and what sort of project you're planning to do. So Denisha, we can start with you.
Yeah. So my name is Denisha Campbell. I'm a third-year PhD student in the Communication Science and Disorders program. Roughly, my research involves cultural responsivity, working with Black and Latinx students and the educators that support them, whether they be speech-language pathologists or teachers. And so I work a lot with bilingual kiddos, really Spanish-English bilinguals. And so the Fulbright seemed to be really up my alley when I saw the opportunity.
Alba, we can go with you next.
Yeah, my name is Alaba Ilesami, born and raised in Lagos, Nigeria. A second year PhD student in the musicology program, and I also direct the African Ensemble at FSU. My research really is on Fela Kuti, who is a Nigerian musician, and I've been working on this project for a while now. And at this point, in thinking about the project and what I want to do for the dissertation, I figured that it would be important to go to the UK to use the archive, because I also discovered that Fela's grandfather was a musician and he recorded some songs in 1922 in the UK, sitting there in the British Museum. So I thought a Fulbright would be great to go to the UK. And see what I can find in the archive, and that would in turn help my project, my dissertation project.
Emily?
Hi, everyone. I'm Emily Liu. I'm a third-year PhD student in history, and I applied to a US student research grant or program with the Fulbright to Japan. And I chose Japan really just because my major field is in Japanese history, and I study mainly World War II Japan. I'm focusing on the military music during wartime and most of the archival sources, and also me trying to trace the kind of activities of these Japanese musicians and artists, their activities within Japan. For that, I really just have to get to Japan. So that was the reason for me choosing to go to Japan.
And Dylan.
My name is Dylan Glenn. I'm a third-year doctoral student in voice performance through the music school. And I applied for an open study research grant to Spain. Part of my treatise work focuses on Iberian women composers from the turn of the 20th century. And so it's in part it's an outgrowth of that. But the purpose of this specific research grant would be to work in partnership with a music archive in Madrid to produce an anthology of art songs featuring these female composers from the turn of the 20th century. Anthologies are used a lot in vocal programs around the United States, but what it means is everybody goes to the same ones and all the same music gets recycled over and over again. So part of the purpose of this would be to gather information, put it into a digestible format so that students around the country can start performing and circulating this unknown music.
Yeah, thank you. So just to quickly summarize that, you're all applying for fairly different things, and you're all in fairly different programs. Denisha, you're hoping to go teach English in Uruguay. Alaba, you are looking to enroll in a graduate program in London that will also allow you access to archives and to some training that you need to complete your dissertation at FSU. And Emily and Dylan, you're both applying for open study projects. Emily, you in Japan, and Dylan, you in Spain. How do you all, so we'll go in the same order for this one. How do you all see your Fulbright experiences fitting into your doctoral timeline and sort of into your graduate career more broadly?
Great. So for me, the timeline is really interesting because Uruguay actually had a different timeline as opposed to other programs. And so right now it's December 5th, 2022. Uruguay wouldn't start until March of 2024. So that was something to, consider and think about. I'm currently funded on a grant for my doctoral studies, and so it gives me up to 5 years. I started back in 2020, and so I would fall within my window. And so it really did kind of make sense. I'm at the point now where I'm working on my preliminary exams. And so data collection and everything could happen. But the Fulbright made sense because it would supplement a lot of the work that I do. And I had to really pitch it to my department in a way to look at it as a holistic way to build my line of inquiry, to be able to, inform education and look at it from a global sense. Because a lot of people did, have thoughts and concerns about me taking a quote unquote break in my PhD studies to go and do this venture. However, when I was able to formulate it in a way that would suggest that it is going to help me for the greater outcome and help me to be a marketable candidate when I do go on the job market, to be able to have great access to the educational infrastructure that is held within Uruguay and be able to take that information and bring it back to US systems, especially because we do find that within the US, we have a growing population of Spanish-speaking individuals, especially within our school systems. And so we don't necessarily always have the infrastructure to support them. And so being able to see what works really well in another country where, the literacy rates are impeccable, and being able to take that information and bring it back was a good selling point. So it all kind of came together in a really nice way.
Okay, for me, my story is similar to what Denisha just described. Um, my timeline, it happens that this just pretty much worked out seamlessly, to be honest, because I think one of the advantage that I have is the fact that I did my master's here at FSU. So the majority of my coursework already completed, and I'm working now on my preliminary examination, right? So in terms of my timeline, it works perfectly because by the end of spring 2023, I would already be done with my preliminary exam and will be ready to undertake research or whatever training I'll be getting in the UK. And I'm also fortunate to be a McKnight Fellow. So in terms of funding, I have 5 years funding. So during the Fulbright here, I guess I'll be putting my funding on a pause. But in terms of how the Fulbright fits into my overall career, my research and everything, we have a very excellent music program here at FSU, which is great. But for me, as an African and someone who is interested in African musicology, we don't have African studies at FSU. So part of what I'll be getting with the Fulbright is not just the opportunity to do research in the UK, but also it's the chance to get a master's in African studies from the School of Oriental and African Studies in London. And in terms of my career, that would just make me a better scholar, really. Um, and in terms of how everything with the Fulbright will fit into my dissertation, I mean, that's entirely my dissertation because I'm writing about Fela, but not just really about Fela, but I'm using Fela um, as a springboard to discussing issues within the global Black world, right? There's no better way to do that than to do research in the US, in the UK, and in Nigeria, right? So in terms of this fitting into my overall career and coursework, it's just all working seamlessly together for me.
And as for me, so I mean, right now, also fits perfectly into my sort of doctoral program timeline because I just entered my third year, and I'm proposing to go on Fulbright trip for my fourth year, and that's usually the year that history PhD students spend for their doctoral dissertation research. And so, yeah, in terms of timeline, that's the perfect time to go, basically, if you still look forward to graduate within 5 years. And, you know, choosing to go to Japan, I mean, it just makes more sense because, as I mentioned before, that's where my study is based and where the sources are based. And also the Fulbright has this aspect where they want candidates or applicants to engage in cultural exchange programs or activities. And it makes sense for me to do that since the study that I'm doing is my attempt trying to bridge the sort of gap between Anglophone and Japanese scholarship, and also really just global scholarship on the study of Japanese war music. And I think everything just converged together and sort of made me realize that this is the perfect time to do a research grant with Fulbright, because it also kind of accommodates, or it conforms to what Fulbright sort of expects of their ideal scholars.
As for myself, I'm actually the doctoral degree program for performance majors through the School of Music is only 3 years long. So I actually am in the final year of my doctoral studies, and I passed my preliminary exam, so technically I'm ABD now, but this works perfectly for me because I'm still eligible for Fulbright participation since I'm still enrolled in a doctoral program. And it sort of presents just the right seamless transition away from my academic studies into more applied field research, which then provides me with a venue and a segue back into academia in full-time professorship, which is part of my eventual long-term goal plan. In terms of why Spain and why that was fitting, I have a personal connection there. I lived there for a couple of years. I speak Spanish fluently. And so much, as I mentioned before, my treatise work is already dealing with similar subject matter. So it just sort of fit into that perfectly. And then in terms of my sort of the suitability for my long-term career goals, as a performer who wants to be an active performer and also sort of exist in academia as well, this is the perfect venue for me because it provides me with material that I personally can go out and present and perform and advocate for in that way. But then also as a future instructor, right, in terms of the students that are in my own studios, that are in my classes, it provides me with solid materials that I can provide to them to advocate for the performance and circulation of these performers who, frankly, have been neglected by mainstream music history. So again, for me, it was sort of a converging of crossroads that came together really nicely in this project.
Yeah, thank you. So Emily, you mentioned that an important aspect of Fulbright is the cultural exchange side of things. That this isn't merely a grant program to send you to do your research as other grants might do, but it really is to help build bridges between the United States and other countries around the world. And so you all have some sort of supplemental project or cultural engagement project as part of your application. How did you come to that side of the Fulbright? How did, I don't know for all of you if that was sort of the initial draw into the program, but I also know that your projects are all different in the ways that they engage with that. I mean, Dylan, the difference between your project and simply doing cultural engagement is there's very little difference. The overlap is almost entire. Whereas Denisha, the ETA, you have the required you have this many hours within a classroom a week, and then you have you're expected by Fulbright to be engaging in something beyond that. You're all expected to be engaging in something beyond whatever your project is, but the expectations differ a little bit based on the type of award and the country you're going to, and what it is overall you're proposing to do. So how did you handle that side of the application and planning what your Fulbright grant would look like?
I can speak to that, especially with me coming from the ETA side. And so with mine, I was really grappling with that at the beginning because I'm a researcher. This is what I do. You know, I've dedicated my life to this. And so to go in and not do a research-based project while in Uruguay was off-putting in a sense. And so I was really excited that there was an opportunity to do a supplemental project because it would then allow me to get my little toe in the door of research while still working on this other thing. And so Uruguay's program is unique in the way that, you know, you're going to be in different locations while you're there. So they have their urban settings, but then they also have their rural settings, as well as like looking at, you know, older kiddos versus like younger kiddos. And so I thought that was a great opportunity to get research in the door and talk to different policymakers, different stakeholders, and then build my research off of that. So it's really just a side project that can serve as the basis for, again, this longevity of a research line of inquiry and working on it in that regard. And so I was really eager about doing the supplemental project. And so then there's another piece that actually you, Dr. McCall, was really influential in, and just like being able to still live your life while you're in this other place. And so, you know, one of the things that I do, I will admit that I am a gym addict. And also just I love to dance. And so being able to have immersion that way, where, you know, I think I wrote into my project that I would be really, really open to teaching dance classes to just community members or my students after class, and being able to pick up, you know, what are custom dances that way. And so, because that was really, I think calming to me. I think I, you know, got really excited about doing the project, and I was like, oh shoot, I haven't been away from my home in a different country for like more than 3 weeks at a time. So how do I really integrate myself within this new community? And so it's really just being authentic to you. And so I think being able to write that in and have that be a part of my supplemental project as well really helped to calm some anxieties that I was having.
My project lends itself really easily to community engagement because music, by definition, is intended to be a community event, right? It's something that you share with other people. So it was fairly easy for me to sort of hook into the idea of collaborating with local musicians, with local groups to perform and circulate this music in Spain. It was harder for me to figure out how it was a two-way street of cultural exchange between the U.S. and Spain, though, because I would be circulating Spanish music to a Spanish audience, which of course is extremely important, but only fulfills sort of one side of that exchange road. So it was actually not until my internal review interview that one of the professors suggested that I consider including contemporaneous female American composers on those concerts as well, so that you get sort of both sides of the coin there, introduce both to a Spanish audience and then on return to an English-speaking audience. So there's a really beautiful opportunity there to combine both cultures in a way that's really connective. But that's one thing I'm really grateful for, is that was sort of a natural unfolding for me, because the nature of my profession is so much dealing with that sort of community and exchange side of things.
Yeah, my response will be very short. Initially, I was very worried about that aspect of the application. As Dr. McCall, you would recall that, you know, we had this conversation about, you know, what to actually do on the side, you know, for my community engagement. But as Dylan said, I guess it happened in an organic way for me eventually, because music just lends itself to community engagement naturally. And since I'll be in London and I'm writing about Fela and I've been to London before, and the idea of living in a very big city is not strange to me, and the idea of integration is not strange to me as one who was an immigrant to this country. So all of that just came together in terms of formulating what to have on the side. So for my community engagement, what I proposed doing was to participate in organizing the Felabration, which is a festival that celebrates Fela's legacy. And they usually have this event in Nigeria and the UK. So part of what I proposed was to be part of the organizing committee and perhaps even volunteer to play or help organize rehearsal or anything of that sort. So yeah, I came to mine in an organic way, though I was worried about it at first.
So for my cultural engagement proposals, I initially did not really think about it before really understanding what Fulbright was about. I just knew that all of my professors in the history department, or not all of them, but most of them, especially those that focus on non-U.S. history, they've all gone on Fulbright grants to other places, and so I just thought it's a grant that's for scholars who want to go abroad. But then I learned about the cultural engagement aspect of it, and I thought that it didn't really need too much thinking because there's already been a lot of very, I guess, rich cultural exchange activities between Japan and the US. A lot of US students and also newly graduates, they go to Japan to teach English, for example, for a year, and then they come back, or sometimes they choose to stay there. There's that sort of exchange going on. And I've done that, but with a private organization before. So I've taught English in Japan before. And so the first thing that came to mind was when I go to Japan, that's what I could spend my time doing in terms of community engagement services, or, that's a very, I guess, useful way to make myself, I guess, useful to the people over there, because a lot of people are actively trying to learn English. And then the other activity that I propose to do is actually recommended by my affiliation institution professor. So he told me that the university I propose to go to, Waseda University, has one of the largest number of student clubs in Japan, and I could, do some sort of student activities with those students, and also attending workshops or conferences at other universities, since it's in Tokyo and there's plenty of institutions for me to, I guess, network or visit. And he was very helpful, I guess, in helping me propose those sort of academic engagements with the scholarly community in Tokyo. So.
Well, it is certainly the hope of our internal process that it provides that structure and that encouragement, and helps you know what you don't know along the way, because we don't expect anybody to enter the Fulbright application process being an expert in what Fulbright is looking for and being an expert in putting that application together. So a couple things that were brought up. One is that I think all of you went through at least 7 drafts over the course of working on this. We certainly find that for not just Fulbright, but every award, a lengthy process where you're intentionally revising and having multiple drafts is what leads to the most successful applications. You were all working with me to get feedback, but who else were you working with? Were you working with faculty? Did you have peers and other colleagues who were providing you with any feedback, reading your stuff, or even just letting you bounce ideas off of them? What did your sort of overall support look like?
There's so many people helping me out on this application. I'm trying to recall everyone, but my major professor was helping me out in terms of reading the draft. Some of my colleagues also read my draft, and then my three professors, actually two, in addition to my major professor that wrote my recommendation letters, actually read it also. So not only was I getting help from the OGFA in terms of the structure and the writing, but I was also getting content advice in terms of, you know, if whatever if my argument were making sense or how I could better my content. So yeah, I had help outside of the OGFA, but my primary help through all of this was Dr. McCall, because we met at least 5, 6 times revising my application. And I recall at the time I was in Nigeria, so the internet was also a problem. Um, yeah, so I had all those help.
I have a very quick answer for this. I didn't really ask anyone else to overlook my draft besides Dr. McCall and my advisor. And she really volunteered to do it. I didn't like actively, I don't think I actively like pursued. And yeah, but besides that, I think maybe I had one or two peers that just looked at the grammar and the spelling and just the copy editing aspect of it. I think the challenge was that in terms of content, because the research was so specific and it was very dense on certain aspect of this period of history and the politics in it, not many people were able to give too much critique or comment on it. So that was really the problematic part of finding someone to help me edit the essay. But Dr. McCall was able to, give me a lot of advice on just the general grant writing aspect of things. And then there was my advisor who was able to, who's a little bit more familiar, of course, with my research, and she gave very valuable edits as well.
Yeah, mine were all personal connections. My wife is a musician and an academic as well, so that's the perfect combination and the perfect person to go through those. So she offered me a lot of practical advice. And then, as I mentioned, my older sister, I think, was a 2019 Fulbright Open Research Grant recipient. And subsequently, she sat on review boards for Fulbright. So she was able to give me a lot of wonderful feedback too. So those were probably the primary people that I sort of collaborated with outside of FSU.
Well, Emily and Dylan, you both had, because of you're doing an open study type award, Denisha, because you did an ETA, you didn't have to worry about an affiliation, and Alba, because your graduate enrollment would count as the affiliation, you didn't have to secure that separately from the application process. But Emily and Dylan, you both did. And I know that for many students doing the open study, that can be one of the most challenging things. That's often where, unfortunately, we lose people in the process, especially if they're applying to Europe and they're trying to get in touch with European academics in the summer when they are on vacation. The process of getting in touch with an affiliate and then making sure you get the letter back from them and not just get a sort of verbal commitment from somebody saying, I'd be happy to work with you, is difficult. So how did you guys go about that? Was that harder than you expected it to be? Did it go more easily than you expected it to be? Did you have faculty facilitate that process at all, or did you just sort of cold email?
It was a complex game of connections for me. It unfolded pretty easily and naturally and fluidly, which I'm really grateful for, because I know it's not that way for a lot of people. But essentially, I think it was a YouTube video that I saw of someone giving an interview, sort of tangentially related to my topic, that was an academic and a composer in Spain. I reached out to her via email, and she immediately got back with me with a really enthusiastic response, and didn't just say, hey, I'm interested in your research, but also said, here are a bunch of people that I can connect you to directly, that I know personally. So that was hugely pivotal, because she actually put me in touch then directly with the director of the research center that I'm going to be working with, that I would be working with as part of Fulbright. And I don't know if I had reached out to the director, if I would have received an email back. First of all, I don't think her email is just like readily available on the internet. So I probably would have had to just send to a general email. And I honestly don't know if it would have made it to her table or if she would have had, just the feasibility to take a look at my ideas and my proposals if it hadn't come through a really direct connection that she already knew and trusted. So that's sort of how it unfolded for me. And I'm grateful too to be studying a topic that does have, it's a very small group of academics and professionals in Spain, but they all know each other and they're all very closely connected with each other. So even though the numbers are small, I've been able to get into contact through that group of connections with a lot of amazing people. So yeah, connections are the name of the game.
So for me, I think I actually first looked up this potential affiliation or affiliated professor. And I think I met someone at a conference who said that they could connect me to him. But when I followed up, I didn't hear back. So when I talked to my advisor about it, and we talked about her helping me to get in touch with some of the faculty members that she became acquainted with when she was in Japan on Fulbright. But that was years ago, and some of them might have retired already. And also, she was in a different area of history. But she did give me the lead of the university. So she told me to look at the university and try to connect with any of the, professors that may seem like a good fit to me. And so I did reach out to one professor because he specifically said on his faculty profile page that he's interested in hosting foreign scholars. And I guess I got lucky when I found this professor. And he has been and during the entire process, he was very, very helpful and very supportive. I actually received his email sometime in the middle of the summer, and I didn't get back until, I think September-ish, right before I was supposed to secure the affiliation letter. So I felt like it wasn't very, polite on my part not to have responded sooner. So I do not recommend anyone to follow my example, but he was very nice about it. And he just wrote me the letter like right away. So that was sort of like my process. It wasn't exactly through connection, but I definitely received advice on where to find a potential advisor.
So some morals to pull out of that would be to start as early as possible, finding, with the process, to try whatever connections you have through networking at conferences or through faculty and other connections that you have, and see if they can put you in touch with anybody in country, or put you in touch with somebody who can put you in touch, with somebody. I know, sometimes just the cold email works. And Emily, finding somebody whose faculty page says, I'd be happy to host foreign scholars, is obviously a great person to reach out to. You can expect some sort of answer, at least. And even if they don't wind up being your affiliation, they might be able to suggest somebody else. So we are almost out of time, but I do want to have a last round of questions here so now that you've all gone through this program and realized that you didn't know what you didn't know, what would you want somebody to know? What if you had to sort of pass along one piece of advice or one tip to a prospective Fulbright applicant, another graduate student at FSU, what would it be?
So my one advice to anyone applying for the Fulbright, the process could be challenging. The application itself could be a little bit challenging. I mean, how do you write about your life and your personal trajectory and academics and all of that in one page? That itself is very challenging. But what I would say is, and this is where I'm at this point, is that whether I get the Fulbright or not, the experience and the process has been very rewarding in terms of gaining clarity on my own research and what I actually want to do, and actually reflecting on my personal journey and how all of that brings me, or perhaps let me say, how my personal journey shapes my scholarship. So it's been very super rewarding. So anyone going through it, I mean, the goal is to get a Fulbright, but if you don't, it's still a very rewarding process to go through.
I can definitely attest to that. But I guess my piece of advice would be to keep options open early on. I think a lot of my frustration through the process was that I was trying to fit a square peg, which is my current academic program, into the circle of doing a research opportunity with Fulbright. And when the aha moment of you can do an ETA came out and how that seamlessly kind of happened, things fell into place. And so I would have saved myself a lot of time, a lot of podcasts, a lot of YouTube videos, had I just, opened my mind up to the possibilities, even as somebody who's a PhD student, even as somebody who's a researcher, because that ended up making more sense for me as opposed to trying to force it. And just really be honest about where you are, where you're coming, and what they're looking for. I think, with my specific application to Uruguay, they basically had my name on the application, not really, but it was for me. And so that is something that you also want to like fit and match is everything.
Yeah, for me, I would say be open to the inevitability of the evolution of your ideas. The way that my project changed was drastic. And I'll be honest, I didn't always love some of the feedback that I got from certain people. But incorporating it made my project so much fuller and more meaningful, again, in ways that I never would have come to on my own. So, really being open to the idea, they always say strong ideas loosely held, which I think is perfectly applicable here. Be passionate about what your project is, but also be genuinely open to change, to evolution, to ideas that other people have in different perspectives, because that's going to make your project have more depth and impact.
I kind of second everything everyone else has already said, especially what Alaba said about, it's more about the experience, not the journey, but not really the destination. Because I mean, yes, ideally, I want to get that Fulbright, but the process of it all really helped me shape the entire project in my own mind and articulate it to a lay audience, for example. And it was a good practice for future grant writing because I had other fellowship and grant applications due this semester, and the Fulbright was the first. So that really paved way for them all. And other than that, I think I mean the review process and the interview process with other FSU faculty members, that was also very insightful. I think some of us have mentioned already that they provided very valuable feedback, and I think a lot of students or applicants might have the idea that they're there to like tear you down, but it's not like a defense necessarily. Sometimes they're just really trying to get an idea of what your project is about. So I think being, open to some of their questions and feedback is very, very important.
Well, thank you all for sharing that. We certainly hope that that you get something worthwhile out of the application process, even if you don't wind up getting the Fulbright. But of course, right now, these selection panels have just started meeting, so I am crossing my fingers for all of you and sending good thoughts towards those panels and towards your applications.